Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that's probably on a lot of your minds if you're in the financial sector, the FSCC's brand new guidance on cloud outsourcing. As more of us move to the cloud, the regulatory heat is definitely getting turned up. And this paper, it's not just another report to file away. Think of it as a practical playbook for navigating the really complex world of cloud risk and compliance.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll kick things off with the big picture challenge, then we'll walk through this new playbook from the FSSC. We'll really get into the details on due diligence, who's responsible for what, and building resilience. And then we'll wrap up by looking at what this all means for the industry going forward.
So, first up, let's just set the stage here. If you're a financial institution, you're in a pretty tough spot, right? On one hand, you have the incredible promise of the cloud. All the innovation, the scale, the efficiency. But on the other hand, you're working in one of the most heavily regulated industries on the planet, with super strict rules on risk and security. It's a real high-stakes balancing act.
And this quote from the Treasury's cloud report last year, it just nails the central problem. You have a handful of huge cloud service providers, or CSPs, who, let's be honest, hold most of the power in negotiations. This can lead to these lopsided contracts that make it tough for individual firms, especially the smaller ones, to really manage their risk. And that's not just a problem for one company. It can create risk across the entire financial system.
And this all boils down to one fundamental truth. You can outsource a service, but you can never, ever outsource accountability. Financial institutions are still 100% on the hook for meeting every single regulatory requirement. That makes having rock-solid contracts and doing rigorous due diligence completely non-negotiable.
And this responsibility, it's not a one-time thing. It stretches across the entire third-party risk management lifecycle. It starts way back in the planning phase, before you even think about signing a contract. It carries through the tough negotiations and the constant monitoring. And it doesn't end until that relationship is properly terminated and you know your data is safely moved.
Okay. So, with all that challenge as a backdrop, let's look at how the industry is responding. Because this isn't just another rule book being handed down from on high. It's actually a collaborative effort to build a shared solution. Now, the key thing to get about this paper is that it's a voluntary reference tool. It's not a new law. It was put together by the FSSC, working with financial firms, industry groups, and even the big cloud providers themselves. The whole point is to create a common playbook, something that levels the playing field a bit and makes sure everyone is speaking the same language when it comes to compliance. So, how does this playbook actually help you in practice? Well, the first big piece is all about diligence and oversight. Basically, giving financial institutions the tools they need to get real transparency and control. A classic pain point for any risk manager has been getting meaningful audit rights. Getting a standard SOC2 report is one thing, but it's not always enough. This guidance really pushes for more. It says CSPs should provide direct access, either on-site or virtually, to their key facilities every year. And just as important, it says you need the right to do your own follow-up on those pooled audits to dig into risks that are specific to your business. And, it's really important to see that these recommendations aren't just coming out of thin air. They're tied directly to what regulators, like the FFIEC, the Fed, the OCC, and the FDIC, already expect. This paper is basically connecting the dots, translating those high-level expectations into something practical you can use in a contract negotiation.
The paper also dives into the really tricky issue of supply chain risk, nth-party risk. Your risk doesn't stop with your cloud provider. It goes all the way down to their critical subcontractors. So the guidance calls for full transparency there, and it recommends that you get at least 180 days notice before they change your critical subcontractor, giving you the right to walk away if you're not comfortable.
All right, next up. The playbook tackles an area where, let's face it, a lot of compliance gaps happen. Figuring out exactly who is responsible for what. This is where things can get really messy if you're not careful. And it all comes down to what's called the shared responsibility model. This is a core concept in the cloud. The CSP is responsible for the security of the cloud, the physical data centers, the hardware, the core networking. But you, the customer, are responsible for security in the cloud, how you configure your services, who you give access to, and how you protect your own data. The problem has always been that the lines can be kind of blurry. So to fix that, the report recommends that CSPs provide a really clear responsibility matrix for their services and map it to a common standard like the Cyber Risk Institute profile. This would give you a single, clear document that spells out exactly who owns which control. No more ambiguity.
Another huge issue for risk managers is vendor lock-in. How do you get out if you need to? Well, the paper pushes for clear and fair exit plans. It says CSPs should provide smooth data migration services. And get this, it says if you're forced to leave because your CSP won't comply with a new regulation, you shouldn't have to pay to get your data out. That's a real game changer.
Now, of course, even with the clearest responsibilities, things can still go wrong. And that brings us to operational resilience. This is all about what you do when an incident hits and how you keep the business running.
A major issue here has been incident notification. Sometimes, to get a detailed root cause analysis, an RCA, you have to be on a premium support plan. The FSSC is basically saying that's not acceptable. Critical information about why something broke shouldn't be a premium feature. They recommend proactive communication and RCAs for all financial customers so everyone can figure out the impact and adjust their defenses.
And again, this lines up perfectly with existing rules. Regulations from all the major agencies already demand timely and thorough disclosure of incidents. This guidance is just giving the industry a clear roadmap to actually meet those obligations in a cloud environment. And finally, resilience isn't just a plan that sits on a shelf. It has to be tested. The guidance calls for cloud providers to actively participate in annual, industry-wide resilience drills. The idea is to move from theory to actual practice, testing realistic, large-scale failure scenarios right alongside the financial firms and regulators.
So with this new playbook in hand, what's the bottom line? Where does the financial sector actually go from here?
Well, the report doesn't just drop these ideas and walk away. It actually gives a very clear action plan. It boils down to 3 immediate priorities to make all of this a reality. Okay, so step 1, get financial firms to actually use this paper as a tool when they're negotiating contracts. Step 2, keep the conversation going with the cloud providers to agree on some standard baseline terms. And step 3, encourage the regulators to actually check if CSPs are following these expectations during their examinations. You see how it creates this full cycle of adoption, collaboration, and then supervision. At the end of the day, all of this work is about creating a sustainable path forward. The goal is to make sure that all financial institutions, not just the huge ones with all the bargaining power, can tap into cloud innovation safely, soundly, and in a way that satisfies the regulators.
This framework is a really huge step for managing the risks we face today. But it also leaves us with a pretty big question for tomorrow. As cloud adoption just keeps accelerating, how do we make sure this kind of collaboration evolves? How does it move beyond just managing risk to actually help build a more resilient and truly innovative financial system for everybody? Thanks for watching The Explainer.